right, obviously another consequence of having unprotected sex is pregnancy. So according to this, about 625,000 US teenage pregnancies in the most recently reported year. I think this was taken in 2015 or something like that. And 11,000 of those are younger than age 15, so very young. About 25% of teenage pregnancies end in abortion, and 89% of the adolescent births are to unmarried mothers. And that number of unmarried mothers has risen pretty dramatically since like the 1950s or so, probably due more to like our acceptance of someone being a single mother compared to previous years. The US is one of the highest numbers of teenage pregnancies in all of the like developed industrialized countries, and that probably comes down to a lot of the way that we do sex ed and things like that in this country, but pretty high up there. Some of the factors that have been shown to increase risk of teenage pregnancy have to do with parenting styles. So if parents are not very warm, if they're neglectful or abusive, then a girl coming from that parenting style is more likely to become pregnant. If there's been repeated parental divorces, that also contributes. Girls who have poor school academic achievement, if they're using drugs or alcohol, all of those also contribute to teenage pregnancies. Girls who show aggressive and antisocial behaviors early on, if they live in neighborhoods with deviant peers, or if they come from a low socioeconomic status background, all of those have been factors associated with it. Some of the risks for teenage pregnancy, both to the mother and the baby. So mothers who have had a baby in their teenage years tend to have lower educational and occupational outcomes, so they're less likely to graduate high school, go to college, and to get a career that they would like. Most or a large proportion of teenage mothers either don't get married, or if they do get married, they get divorced pretty early, and so they're spending a large majority of their parenting time as a single parent. They are also very prone to multiple teenage pregnancies. What is the statistic on that? I have the number, but I forgot it off the top of my head, so I'll find it in my notes. So around 35% of teenage mothers become pregnant again within 2 years of having the first baby. And you may think, maybe that's a chosen thing. Maybe they decide that they want to have more kids because they want to give this kid a sibling or something like that. However, about half of those second pregnancies end in abortion. And so that would suggest that a lot of those second pregnancies are also unwanted pregnancies. And so it seems like, a lot of cases they aren't, it's not like they have a kid and then they realize, okay, I should start using contraceptives. They usually continue to engage in those risky sexual behaviors. They also have a lot of financial difficulties. So having a baby is extremely expensive, and they may not, the mother themselves may not have an income. If they're married, then the father often will either be unemployed or will be in a really low paying job. And so it can be really difficult to have all the finances that they need. Teenage pregnancies are more likely to have pregnancy and birth complications. Teenage mothers are more likely to drink, smoke, and have a poor diet whenever they're pregnant, and so that can lead to complications with the baby. And they also often have weaker parenting skills. They may be harsh and abusive towards their children. That could be due to just the fact that they're not cognitively ready to be a parent, and just the stress of having a child that they didn't plan for. But it also could be that they're carrying on the parenting skills that they learned from their parents as well. All right, I'll say, like I've said with a lot of things, all of this is obviously a generalization. I actually got pregnant when I was 18, and I was 19 when my son was born. Was not planned. I was not married, although I am married to the father of my child now and have been for 13 years now, something like that. And none of these things were true for me. So I graduated high school. I immediately went to college, went to graduate school. I'm now a professor. Obviously didn't spend any time as a single parent. My son is an only child. We definitely had some financial difficulties initially because, like I said, having a kid is extremely expensive. And I think the reason that I was able to kind of overcome some of these risks that you have is because I had a large support network. So my family was very supportive. My parents and my husband's parents were very helpful in like taking care of our child whenever he was really young. I decided to go to community college about 30 miles away from home rather than going to like a big university, because I lived in like Southwest Kansas, which has no schools around it, so I would have had to go like 8 hours to go to university. So I went to community college for 2 years, and I like intentionally scheduled all my classes where it would only be either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And my mom would drive 30 miles every day I had class to come and watch my son for me so that he didn't have to go to daycare. My husband quit school and got a really good job, so that he worked his way up, so that eventually we overcame those financial difficulties. And I also used like government programs. So I used something called WIC, which is kind of like food stamps, but only for mothers of young children. We were actually on food stamps for a long period of time, and we also used government programs to help pay for daycare once my son was in daycare, because daycare is like absurdly expensive. It's like crazy. I think whenever we first moved to Iowa, my son was probably around 2. That was when he first went to daycare, and we were paying about like $650 in rent, and his daycare was like $1,000 a month. So daycare is like more than your house in a lot of cases. So extremely expensive. So you can understand where those financial difficulties come from. But again, my point to bring all this up is just to say this doesn't have to be the outcome of teenage pregnancy. I think a lot of the reason that this often is the outcome is because people expect it to be. If you get pregnant as a girl in high school, you've been told all your life, this is going to ruin your life if you do this. And so I think if someone then gets pregnant, they just kind of, basically just live with that standard of this is supposed to ruin my life, so I'm just going to drop out of high school and basically give up and quit. But that doesn't have to be the case, particularly if you're willing to ask for help and get support from other people. So yeah. All right. However, though, in a lot of cases, those risks are true. And so I think as a society, we should strive to prevent teenage pregnancies as much as possible. It's been shown over and over again that effective sex education that emphasizes use of contraceptives can be very effective in reducing teenage pregnancy. A lot of the sex education programs that we have in this country are like abstinence only, which basically don't really teach about contraceptive use, and those have not been shown to be effective to reduce teenage pregnancies. So the best sex education programs should teach skills for handling sexual situations. So not just teach, like the anatomy and what happens when you get pregnant and stuff like that, but actually teaching teenagers, okay, what if you're out with your boyfriend on a Friday night and he's pressuring you to have sex? What do you do? What do you say? How do you deal with that situation, right? So teaching teenagers those more like complicated social aspects is really important. Giving teenagers information on and access to contraceptives. It's actually giving them condoms or birth control or whatever they want to use. Also, basically doing things that will help them see a brighter future. So it's been shown that teenagers who have a plan for their future, who know, that they want to go to college or they want to get a job in a particular area, and they can see themselves doing that, they're a lot less likely to get pregnant in their teenage years. So building academic and social competence, expanding educational, vocational, and employment opportunities, all of those can also reduce teenage pregnancies. And then this kind of goes back to what I was saying. If a teenager happens to get pregnant, then it shouldn't be seen as like the end of the world. They should be provided, first of all, with good health care, so providing government assistance to help them pay for that, things like that. Encouraging them to stay in school, and schools can help by having maybe daycares that are at the school, or by having flexible schedules where there's night classes and online classes where a mother can take those classes and not necessarily have to put their kid in daycare. Giving them job and life management training and parenting instruction, so basically teaching them how to be an effective parent. Providing them with adult mentors and social support. Making childcare affordable. So like I said, I can't imagine how I would have made it to where I am now if I hadn't had assistance in paying for that extremely expensive childcare, and also providing support to the fathers. So unfortunately, in a lot of cases of teenage pregnancy, the emphasis is placed on the mother, and there's not really a lot of support and expectations of the father in those cases. And so providing training and things like that for the father can also be really helpful.